Morning, Eugene.
Morning, Daren.
So we're inside your McLaren 765 LT.
Yep.
LT standing for long tail. Okay, tell us a little bit more about this car.
Okay, so this car is an evolution of the 720S. It's what they would consider more track-focused version of it. So it's a bit more powerful. It's been lightened. So a lot more carbon fiber in the bodywork. And they've improved the engine. They've taken, I'm not sure if you're familiar with the McLaren Senna.
Yes.
It's one of their special cars, and they've taken some of the parts from that car. For example, the engine has quite a few of the pistons. I think management system and things like that's coming from that car. And then some of the interior, like the seat here.
Yeah, these seats are as close to basically racing seats as you can get in a roady car.
So they're very light. What they've done is they've actually taken out bits of cushion, and so it's become padding instead of the typical cushions you get on seat normal speeds. But in this particular version, so again, interior, they try to make it more sporty, like Alcantara, and it's just a sort of more extreme version of the 720S.
It is. It's basically a pretty aggressive drive, and again, one of the biggest things you'll notice, especially coming from a Tesla or EV, is the engine. So like we're sharing basically the same space with the engine right behind. Can you tell us a little bit more? These are twin V8s?
Yeah, it's a V8 twin turbo. And with McLarens, unlike other supercars, the engine compartment is sealed. So
I see.
You can't really see it. So what they did is they put a bit of a glass there so you can have a look. This one in particular, I optioned it with the rollover bars. So it's more track focused.
Okay.
And what that allows is you can put in the 6-point harnesses for the seats. Though they come through these gaps, and then you get strapped in really nice and tight when you go on track.
And talking about the car and track, like this car is made for track. Like one of the dials here, the T stands for track mode, if I'm correct.
That's right. So regular McLarens would have this as well, but for this car, when you go into the different modes, it would feel more extreme, right? Or the response is a lot more sharp compared to the previous version. There's also the reduction in noise dampening, so you'll hear the engine a lot more.
Yes.
The mechanical sounds, the exhaust is quite a bit louder.
Yeah.
So things like that just kind of heighten the experience.
And like an illustration of how much this is made for track, like the buyer could even opt to remove the air conditioning and the radio. Just to reduce weight.
You can, but of course in Singapore that would be
crazy.
Not a very good idea. I think there are other things internally. So the suspension tweak, the way it's tuned is a bit different. It's more stiff, and I think those are of course the tires as well. So this car has the Trofeo R tires,
custom tires.
So the tires tend to be more custom made for the cars these days. So usually the car manufacturer will develop the car with the tire manufacturer. This one, so the Trofeo R's are like they call them semi-slicks. Okay. So they're not very good for driving on the road because if it rains, it can get pretty scary. But for the track, they're great.
And there's actually when you go on a track mode, and there's even a button on the driver's right. When you click on the button, the heads-up display goes into a simplified version.
Oh, that's right. So there's a button here.
There's a small button there.
So if you go on track mode, this typically what happens, it folds down to give you a better view of the where you're driving.
This makes it a lot more focused because you're just focused on the race. You just need to know all the bare essentials.
So you just get the rev counter, and then maybe the speed and your gear selection, right?
And with the same click of the button, it goes back up again.
Yep. If you click this button, it goes back up.
That is one of the iconic features of this car. Now, a big difference between a McLaren and Tesla is you can clearly see that the interior is a lot more refined and polished. However, Tesla's biggest strength is the software and the interface. And how would you describe the difference between the whole entertainment system here, the software here compared to Tesla?
It is quite different. Definitely, it's not as responsive as a Tesla. You do get the usual things like navigation, for example. You get the maps, but as you can see, how it's plotted. It's a smaller screen, obviously, and it's just not as fast and responsive. I think it is a touchscreen. Yeah, it is. And with the Tesla, you just feel that the car is kind of built around the software.
Yes.
Whereas in these cars, the software is just another part of the car.
Yes.
And that's the main difference, I think.
Thanks for sharing that interior look, Eugene.
Sure.
Today I'm here with Eugene from Tesla Owners Club Singapore to learn about the evolving mindsets of car owners in this country. Eugene has been a member of different car clubs before joining the Tesla Owners Singapore Club. Eugene, tell us about yourself, please.
So I'm Eugene. I'm a tech and car enthusiast, and I like cars, but I also like supercars, and I especially driving them around the racetrack, which I try to do a few times a year, except for now. We're kind of stuck here, I really enjoy driving up in Malaysia particularly.
And we just saw your McLaren earlier, the 765 LT, right? That is a car made for track driving.
It is, yes. It's a more focused version of its previous version, which was the 720S. So more extreme, better handling. Of course, more power. And hopefully more fun. I haven't taken it to track. Not yet, anyways.
Because of COVID, so hopefully soon. Welcome back to Investing with Daren. Click the subscribe button to stay updated with more interviews like this. Let's get started. Eugene, what do you love about cars?
So I like, or at least I love, the tech and the engineering coming together in a car. For cars that are well-tuned, well-designed, it's really about how it's an extension of yourself when you drive it. And I just like that about cars in general. Our cars these days are very tunable, even through electronics, right? So you can custom how it responds, how it drives, right? And I like that. So I like playing the different settings and then discovering what the car does, especially on a racetrack. Right? That's where you get the most appreciation of the differences.
And how do you get started? Was it through like friends, family members?
Mostly through friends. It started when because I used to drive BMWs, and the BMW club would organize these track days in Sepang, right? And we would just go. It would happen maybe once every few months, and we would go there and experience the car on the track. You could do things with the car you would not otherwise dare to do on a normal road. So I found that really fun, and not just for yourself in terms of trying to improve your driving technique, but also discovering more about the car.
And thank you for sharing that. I come from such a different perspective and world, which is totally the opposite of Eugene, which is why we have him here. I do have a cousin, Alex Young, who used to race in the F1. Again, I'm not a car enthusiast. I love tech like Eugene, so we share that. And I think cars are more and more like tech gadgets nowadays, especially software, becoming a bigger and bigger part of what a car is. Eugene, you mentioned that you've driven BMWs before, you've got a McLaren, you've got a Tesla now. Can you tell us a little bit more about your car journey? What cars have you driven before, and what was the mindset behind switching and using the different brands?
Okay, so I started with BMWs, mostly 3, 5 series. And my last one was a 1 series. So that one got to about 110K mileage after about 6 years, and I thought, okay, maybe it's time to change. And I decided that I also want to be a part of this transition to sustainable mobility. And that's when I decided I would get an EV. And then I did some research on the internet, and I realized that the Tesla Model 3 basically met all my needs, right? It's fast, it's got lots of tech, and it provided enough space that I needed because it was a 4-door sedan, and that's typically what I need for various things, right? So I just decided that was the one to get. For my supercars, I've always liked McLaren and it's also because McLaren had a certain way of going about designing their cars, right? It's also quite driven by technology, and their cars they always preferred, they always have this saying with McLarens of form follows function.
I see.
So they design their cars to meet a certain performance in terms of aerodynamics and response.
Yeah.
And then they decide how the car should look.
Right.
And typically they feel that if the car is designed well for its function it's supposed to meet, then it should look pretty good because it's shaped by the air, essentially, right? And that's really the two main brands, and now, of course, the Tesla that I've been driving over the years.
For the McLaren, it's got a storied history. It's one of the most successful F1 racing teams out there. It has a rich legacy. It clearly puts a lot of work into its design, and a lot of people know of the McLaren. What appealed to you about Tesla? Yes, it's one of the most popular EV brands out there. What were your personal decision makers that made you say, Tesla is probably the right EV for me to get into?
Okay, so there are two things, really. The first was just how efficient they are. So that's the biggest thing I find. So when I did the research, I found that Teslas generally had the most range, but with not the biggest batteries. Which means that somehow they're able to get more efficiency from the car than most other EV makers.
Yeah.
And then so it means that they put effort into things like weight savings, battery management, and a very efficient drivetrain, right? So that was the big thing. And then the second was the fact that it seemed like what they tried to do when they designed the car was to start from a blank slate. They looked at what other cars do, but then they decided, how do we do it better?
Yes.
And it felt like they basically made the software first, and then they built the car around the software, right? And if you look at what other EV makers are doing, the part that they struggle with is the software. So it felt like Tesla was good in doing what others were struggling with. So I thought, wow, okay, then that's impressive. And that was what sold me on it. Yeah.
Eugene mentioned about the battery. So on Teslas, the batteries aren't the biggest batteries, but Eugene mentioned efficiency as well. Tesla manages to use its smaller batteries with better utilization. That reduces weight and improves also the mileage. And just like how we think like an iPhone. When you buy an iPhone, it doesn't have the most RAM of all phones. But the experience is seamless, it's smooth, because everything, the hardware, the software, the operating system, just works much better together. And I think that's one thing that appeals to a lot of Tesla owners. The other thing that Eugene mentioned was just building a car from the ground up. When I interviewed my friend Dina, who's a former Tesla employee, they echoed the same thing. They tried this to not incrementally build a car, but think, if I could build a car from the ground up right now, first principles, what would it look like? What would it be? And the fundamental design principle number one is safety. We think about speed, all the performance, efficiency on Teslas first, but really for the engineers, they think about safety as number one. And that's a big part of what appeals to many people too. How much does safety appeal to you, especially in the context of Singapore where the roads are so safe, Eugene?
It is a big thing. Of course, I think with any car you buy, safety is going to be a big factor. I have kids, right, and they get ferried in the car quite a lot. But it was impressive when the numbers, or rather the results from the tests came out for the Model 3 in particular were so good. And then you realize that EVs intrinsically having that big battery at the bottom,
Yes.
which is a very rigid structure, made the cars very safe, right? So it is a big part of it as well.
Same, that's a big reason why if I get a Tesla or Model Y, I look for the safety. I've got a 5-year-old girl myself. What role does the Tesla and your McLaren play in your life? Are they in competition with each other, or is it complementary?
For sure, it's complementary. So the Tesla is the daily drive car. It's the one that clocks the most mileage. I work in Changi Business Park. I live in the central area. So my commute, typically back and forth, it's about 40 clicks a day. And then on top of, if I had to ferry the kids around, so it's quite a lot of mileage on a daily basis. So that's one of the reasons I decided to go for an EV as well, right? And for the McLaren, it's really just a recreational vehicle, right? It's just for fun. It's a hobby, and I drive it not as often, maybe weekends, once in a while, but it's mostly for when we get a chance to go up north to Malaysia to do track days or drive in some of the B roads, in the country roads around Malaysia. And it is, I mean, my friends ask me about, oh, you get an EV, but then your other car is a gas guzzler, right? And so that's kind of how I think about it. The fact that if I'm going to clock lots of mileage, it's always going to be on the EV.
Yeah.
And if I was to have fun, I still want to be able to enjoy something that's combustion engine, right? Yep. And what you get is so different between the two anyway.
These two truly are complementary, because the Model 3 is a sedan. It's really meant for family, day-to-day city commute. The McLaren is a supercar, it's a track racing car. I have a follow-up question here, Eugene. When the new Tesla Roadster is introduced in 2023, how would that influence your mindset when it comes to track cars and recreation cars then?
That's a good question. I haven't thought about it too much, although the Roadster looks very good based on the performance that it's been promised, right? I would definitely consider it. But whether, how long that's going to be, that'll be interesting to see. But the Roadster, it does look a little bit more like a GT sort of car. In other words, it's got 4 seats, right? I think it has some smaller seats at the back.
Yes.
So I'm not sure how much of a sort of track-focused performance car. There may be variants of it that eventually will be. I'm looking forward to it for sure.
Eugene, what are the standout features of a Tesla that matters to you personally? It may not be for everyone else, but for you notice it's actually really cool.
So for me, a big thing is the user interface. The sort of human-machine interface, which is, of course, the software. I find it's very intuitive. And for a car that basically, like we said, started from a blank slate, I think it's very impressive. The car itself drives really well, and it meets all the needs in terms of its overtaking ability. Its convenience features are good as well. I think the big thing is the fact that it's an EV. For me, I think that brings a lot of advantages. Just things that you wouldn't normally be able to do in a regular car. For example, you could wait. If you had to wait in the car, you could have the air conditioning running.
Yes.
Watch Netflix perhaps or YouTube, and you don't feel any guilt about leaving the engine running. So it's made me more patient actually. As if I had to wait for my kids or I had to wait to pick up my wife somewhere, I'm a lot more relaxed and I don't worry about, am I leaving engine running? Am I taking up, burning a lot of fuel and releasing emissions and things like that, right? So I like that about the car. It's actually very convenient in that sense. Besides that, it's like any other performance sedan, really. And in that sense, it's just as fun, I feel, to drive.
There's a lot of joys and merits in a Tesla, yet Teslas aren't perfect and Teslas don't meet every single need. What is it about a McLaren that Teslas can't give you today? Okay,
so the main difference, of course, is the sensory experience, right? You get from a McLaren, the sound, the engine sound, the exhaust, the pops and gurgles you get when you drive it. Of course, the handling and how it feels is different, but for me, I think the biggest thing is when you sit inside, it's that bespoke feeling you get from a supercar. Because these cars, you get to option or you get to select what you like in terms of what you have in the car. So in this case, the car was made very track focused. So you get the sport seats and lots of carbon fiber everywhere. But then also the color trims and some of the features that you can pick. So that makes it feel a bit more special when you sit in it and when you drive it, of course. And I think that's the biggest difference, right? And I think if EVs, when the EV supercars come along, they could be the same. But for now, that's the biggest difference I see.
And to build on Eugene's point, I do feel I'm a fan of both Apple and Tesla. And one of the biggest differences I noticed between both brands is For Apple, they believe that they are at the intersection between the liberal arts and technology. Tesla feels very technology, which is not bad, it's really important and it's changing the world. But the whole artistry, the craftsmanship behind a car, that could be something that they could tap into in the future as well. EVs are well known for their amazing straight line acceleration. Yet there's so much more to driving a car than just going through straight roads, the turns, the handlings, going through hills as well, city and also highway driving, and so much more in all different weather conditions. As a driver of both ICE cars and EVs yourself, Eugene, what have you noticed between both?
So with the Tesla, and in this case, it's the Model 3 Performance. So I find it's, because of the four-wheel drive, it's very sure-footed, that's for sure. So I'm comfortable driving it in heavy rain, over water, standing water rather. Now, in terms of the drive, I think this 0 to 100 is a bit overrated these days. You see a lot of it on YouTube and videos. I think the big thing about what's more important is the 30 to 70 acceleration, because that's where you do overtaking, right? Mostly. So for that, the Tesla is great, and definitely on par with any of the performance sedans you would find on the market. In terms of handling, it actually handles very well, surprisingly. Okay, so what might be missing compared to, say, a German sedan, say an M3, or even say compared to a McLaren? So those are more adjustable, right? So even though on a Tesla, on a Model 3, you get things like chill mode, sports mode, I think sports steering, something like that. On those other cars, you can also adjust the how stiff the suspension is, the dampening rates, and so for regular cars, or rather ICE cars, you get a transmission, right? So you can adjust how aggressive the gear changes are, and you can really feel it, because in the McLaren especially, when you put it on the most aggressive, you get this big push whenever you upshift.
I see.
And they have certain modes that give you a different feeling, and that's, again, it's a different experience.
It sounds almost like that animal spirit of driving.
Yeah, kind of, right? And I'm not sure if people, when they talk about whether that's something they would miss, but I think it's just a different experience, right? You can appreciate both.
Yep.
Certainly with the ICE cars, there's a lot more, the sensory experience is a lot more heightened with the sound, the gear changes, the engine revs changing, so you get a bit of a orchestral sort of feeling with it, right?
That's true. With Tesla's now being the number 8 best-selling car in Singapore, according to LTA data in August 2021, we know that EVs are going to be more and more common. How are EVs like Tesla perceived by some car communities in Singapore?
So I have many friends in car communities, in the supercar community, for example. The opinions range from boring, no sound, to some people feeling, oh, it's a threat. Am I going to lose I'm no longer able to enjoy my ICE car in the future. So it is quite a spectrum of different opinions and feelings out there. Although I'm happy to say quite a few of my friends have bought Teslas, or at least waiting for one. They've had their orders in. And those that have collected it are really enjoying it. And they really appreciate how it's different, but yet when they drive it, they don't miss their ICE cars.
I see.
So I think that's good. So I think it's catching on, right? But it will take time to get broad acceptance, I feel.
And we often hear that it's when someone actually sits in a Tesla for the first time that the perceptions really shift. What's your experience like when you bring friends to ride on your Model 3?
Of course, the first reaction would be, oh, it's so Spartan. It's just one big screen. But once they get driven around or they try it, they realize that it's no different in terms of how it feels from any other car, besides the noise, the sound, of course. And then they get surprised at how well it rides over bumps and how smooth it is. And then they start to appreciate, oh, actually it's pretty quiet. But that's okay, right? Because then you have a different expectation when you get in and drive it, right? And it's just a matter of adjusting those expectations. And then the sound system is actually very good. in a Model 3. And then when you play them the music and all, and they get surprised again, like, oh wow, this sound system is so good, right? And I think and of course once they experience the acceleration, they get a huge surprise, and then they think, okay, wow, this EV drivetrain is pretty amazing. And that's when they start thinking. You can see it processing in their heads. Oh, maybe I should get one, something like that. Yeah,
that's true. We just moved our seats a little bit because you can see behind us the drizzle has turned into a heavier rain. So let's continue. Eugene, what's your advice on how we can help to shift or broaden perceptions about EVs in the car community in Singapore?
And I would say for owners of EVs is to talk to people and communicate to them what the advantages of an EV and what it brings.
Yeah.
And then for people who are considering it or who are skeptical, to talk to the owners themselves, and so get that real feedback, right? Whether it's ownership or driving one.
Yeah.
And I think because there's so much information on the internet, there's always these pros and cons. But if you get the real information from real people, I think that's going to be beneficial for decisions, right? And hopefully that way there'll be more people who would realize the advantages of owning one or driving one.
And now, as there are more and more EVs in Singapore, that's going to be easier for more of us to do as well. By end of this year, you'll probably know at least one friend who has an EV. Very likely.
Yeah.
You mentioned about the pros and cons of Tesla. What are some valid criticisms about Teslas that we should actually know?
Valid criticisms? I think one of them is the build quality. There's some ways to go there. They're definitely not up there with the Germans or the Japanese, but I think they'll improve. So even on my Model 3, you notice panel gaps, and so it is real.
Yeah.
When people talk about build quality. The other thing is a little bit of an over-promising, especially on the autopilot and the full self-driving features. So they talk about it quite a lot, but I think it's going to be a few years before they get where they want to be. And that puts some people feeling a bit uncomfortable with whether they really trust it or not.
Yeah.
So I think something that was a bit more progressive in terms of how they introduced it and talked about it would be helpful.
Agree. Terms like full self-driving autopilot gives a lot of people a perception that it's good to go without human intervention. We can under-promise and over-deliver a bit more. Eugene, what's one tip you have for car owners who are considering a Tesla now?
I'll say go and try it.
Yeah.
If you have a friend, take a ride. In one, go for a test drive if you can, and experience it for yourself.
Okay.
And you will find that you might just like it, and like it a lot, and enough to consider actually just buying one, right? But you also need to do a bit of research in terms of your charging, and especially the charging, right? And if necessary, you might feel they might have to make some adjustments to your schedule or your lifestyle. But plan that ahead of time so that you know what to expect, and I think you'll be fine because things are improving all the time, right? And I think the charging infrastructure is going to be growing very quickly, right?
You mentioned things are improving a lot, charging infrastructure will grow. Some people ask, Eugene, should I just wait 1 or 2 more years to buy my EV? Why get it now? What's your take?
I mean, that's a reasonable question. I think it's really up to whether the individual wants to be, how involved you want to be with this transition to sustainable mobility. For some, it'll be easier than for others. I think what I find is doing it now is, of course, you can take advantage of. I think there's a certain amount of fun in being an early adopter as well.
Agreed.
Discovering the community is a very enthusiastic one. You meet a lot of very smart people who have great ideas about how to bring this forward, and I think it's fun to be a part of that.
That's true.
And just like what we're doing in Tesla Owners Singapore, right? Yeah. I think that's one of the good reasons for being an early adopter. You can be a part of this community.
Yeah. If you like that, it's kind of like being in the early days of the iPhone. Maybe some of you wish, how do I be a pioneer somewhere? This is it. this is the time for EVs. One last fun question for Eugene. What will your next car be and why?
So we're planning to get a Model Y. So my wife drives a BMW X3.
Okay.
And it's coming to 10 years old now. So we're hoping to replace it with Model Y. So we're eagerly awaiting the orders opening up. So I think next year, right?
Yes.
It should be here. So we're hoping to get that.
Nice.
Yep.
We're also looking to get that. I know many BMW, Mercedes owners who are also looking to get the Model Y. And things look promising. I say that because like the UAE just introduced Model Y, more and more countries just introduced Model Y, Hong Kong recently as well. As Gigafactory Berlin and Austin comes up, the first car that they're manufacturing is the Model Y. So when they do start manufacturing, that frees up Giga Shanghai to focus 100% on Asia Pacific markets. That's great news for us in Singapore and other APAC countries. Eugene, thank you so much for sharing your perspective, your years of experience, your passion as a car driver. We've learned a lot. And for our audience, if you want to share your car journey with us in comments, please let us know like, how do you begin, what's making you consider Tesla right now. Thank you for watching today's episode. If you found this interview useful, please click the like button. Hit subscribe to stay updated to more interviews like this. Take care, stay safe, and hopefully not so rainy on your side when you're watching this. Bye-bye.
Bye.